direction. What would you like to talk about?
I was wondering what you would like it if it was like.
How I would like it if it was like, or what I would like it to be like if it was like that.
Yeah. How would you like it to be like if it was like that?
That's quite a difficult question. I'm kind of better at talking about things I don't like, actually.
What don't you like?
I don't like adverts. Any adverts.
I don't like adverts.
I don't want there to be any adverts.
So you'd like it if
there
were
weren't
no adverts.
Yeah. What I quite like is there's a tiny little letter I in a circle at the bottom left-hand corner of a YouTube video.
Information.
You click that when the advert comes on, and sometimes it gives you the option to skip the advert.
I didn't know that.
I would like it if instead of that. Sorry. It's all right. It's only your bum that's on camera. I'd like it if instead of having it that way round, there was a little button for people who would like to watch the adverts. And so everyone else was just spared it.
Do you think there's anyone who would like to watch the adverts?
No.
I actually use the Brave browser, where if you go on YouTube, there's no adverts.
I'd like to use that.
But would you like it if it was like no YouTube, no information button, no adverts, no browsers?
I quite like YouTube.
I like YouTube.
I don't even mind that there's a lot of stuff that's really shit on it.
Wait, no. What I like is being able to listen to any music all the time. YouTube is just some corporation making money off of that.
Because of the adverts.
I think so.
But I like the concept of YouTube. I'd like it if you could say whatever you want and they wouldn't say, oh, that's against our policies, so we've got to censor you.
So some people say there's a problem with that because a lot of people say a lot of dangerous stuff, and obviously a lot of the stuff that is classified as dangerous is probably actually quite useful information.
Yeah.
But then maybe also there are times when people have actually used the power of the internet to spread actually dangerous ideas, like telling people to eat Tide Pods or whatever. But do you think that's a minimal concern?
Well, I just think if everyone's allowed to say whatever they think, then that means all of those things that are potentially dangerous would be discussed more openly, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
So there'd be you'd be able to draw more complete and finished conclusions, rather than being told we don't really talk about that because it causes problems, and then lo and behold the problems arise. I don't know if that's true or not.
So
I'd like it if I knew if things were true or not. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I suppose it would take some of the. It'd be like spoiler alert.
But there are some things where it's not like, ooh, this grand mystery of life. It's just like some people have decided that information's only for specialists.
Or maybe you have to be a specialist to understand the information anyway, so there's no point in
I don't think so. I mean, we go to school for like 100 years when we're kids, and we just learn the Second World War day after day or whatever, do PE, but I just stand around on your phone actually and don't do it. We could be learning how to understand all this stuff that as an adult they tell us, oh, you'd have to be a specialist, we can't explain to you why you have to be poor because you're not an economist and stuff like that. But there is a really good reason why you have to be poor, you just wouldn't understand it.
Yeah, but I don't think that's true when they tell people they have to be poor. It's not.
No, I don't think it's true either. But it's all mystified with this, like there's all this really complex information that we could have just been taught when we were learning all the crap that we didn't need to know. I mean, I'm being quite judgmental. I'm sure there's lots of very useful stuff that we all learned as kids.
Yeah. I'd like it as well. Oh God, I lost my train of thought. It was related to what you were saying. Stuff about education. I'd like it. I'd like it if education was, there was loads of money being spent on it all the time for everyone. Like, that's what I'd like.
Do you think that the paradigm of education that we have at the moment, where like you're 4 or 5, you goes to school and sit in a room every day for 12 years with like loads of kids and a handful of...
Well, you don't necessarily. Some people don't do that.
Mm.
But yeah, in the places where that is happening, I think it's being done deliberately.
But you don't think it's actually a good idea?
No, it's dreadful. It doesn't work. There's not enough. It doesn't cover enough need. That mode of doing it, because not enough money's being spent on it.
Can you imagine a better way that it could be done?
Yeah, I'd like it if. I'd like it really if education was a much bigger. It formed a much more significant part of what our society is, and many more people were involved with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be really good. You mean like because there are so many things outside of the school context that we could learn from, but all of that's like a separate world that you don't discover till you're an adult?
Yeah, and actually when I went to school, like you said, like you learn about all this stuff that doesn't really feel very relevant to you, the history stuff and all of that. But then when you're older, you start to find stuff like that really interesting. So maybe they should just not bother trying to teach it to kids, because kids don't understand why it's actually really useful and interesting yet.
But I think part of that also is because you don't really have any context to place it into when you're a kid, because all you know is like your family and school and your mates. And then once you're actually in the adult world interacting with all of the various aspects of it, you're like, oh, it's really useful to me to know about the history of all of this and all the other things, the science and the maths and geography and whatever, and many other things that they don't teach at school.
Yeah.
It's like there's this, like children are just kept out of the wider world until they've finished learning all the stuff, and so then when they actually need to apply all of that stuff that they've learned, they have to like kind of reconfigure their minds and their understanding of it before they can start putting what they can remember into its useful places in their life.
I mean, I learned how to do long division when I was at school. I learned how to do algebra. I learned how to do all of the Pythagoras stuff and the triangles stuff.
I didn't even learn how to do any of that stuff, you know. Someone stood at the front of a bunch of kids who weren't paying any attention and showed it to us, and we just completely ignored them.
Well, it was similar for me, but I happened to be one of the people who was paying attention during the lessons and doing the work. I was quite scared of getting told off. I wasn't one of these defiant.
But that's not a good reason to learn something either.
No, but I learned it. The point is, I learned it. Since I left school, I've never used any of it, and I don't feel like if there are any problems in my life, it's not caused by not utilising my maths skills, for instance, right? So, and I don't remember any of it now. I don't remember how to do any of those things. So why did I learn it?
I think there's some really cool stuff that you can do if you know a lot about maths, but it's just that's not the way that it's taught to you at school, and you have to have been one of the people who was scared not to learn about it to get to the point where you can now learn like why it's really actually like some higher level advanced wizardry.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I feel like I didn't have maths anxiety. I think it's a big thing for a lot of kids. Someone makes them feel a bit shit about the fact that they got something wrong in a maths lesson when they're quite young, and it traumatises them. And this isn't picked up on often enough when this happens, because lots of kids go through school thinking I'm shit at maths, I'm shit at maths, I'm shit at maths, and so they're not learning any maths because they're too busy thinking I'm shit at maths, I'm shit at maths, I'm shit at maths. It's called maths anxiety, and it's a it's a recognisable thing, you know.
No, society.
And that's, I would like it if that sort of thing, if it did happen, it was picked up on sooner and corrected. You know, that like there are people who actually can't learn maths, but they're incredibly rare. It's very, 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 very rare to have dyscalculia.
And how do you think you would? Do you have an idea of how you would correct it?
Work more on having so I'd like it. I'm going to keep going back to that because that's what we're talking about.
What would you like?
The whole
it
point
if
of the
it was
conversation. I'd like it if people who become teachers are selected more. There's more of an emphasis on selecting who gets to become a teacher based on how good they are at being empathetic and compassionate. Make them less stressed out by spending more money on teaching and having a higher teaching staff to student ratio, so that the pressure's taken off the teachers a little bit. And make sure that actually what we're really focusing on, because really what you need to be teaching first in a school, the first thing you need to teach the students is how to learn things, and how to be good at learning things, and how to enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you started there, that would be a useful thing to do. I mean, I enjoyed learning in spite of my teachers, like even though they kind of made my life a misery. I quite enjoyed the actual finding out new things bit of learning.
But did you feel like when you were a kid, you were like, "Yeah, time to go to school today. Yeah, can't wait."
No, it was torture.
No one feels like that.
And the reason for that is because the teachers who worked with me, there was a culture of bad practice at the school I went to, and the teachers that worked with me misinterpreted the difficulties I had with getting my work done as being laziness, and part of it was that, but people who were less confident and have lower self-esteem tend to find it harder to motivate themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So
I mean, I suffer a lot with that, and I think like I can see why maybe you would describe it as laziness, but I feel like then you're misunderstanding what it is to be lazy. It's not like I just don't care.
You're telling someone who already doesn't feel very good about themselves that there's something else wrong with them as well, and that's always been demotivating for me. So I think spending a lot of money, like instead of the government sort of taking money out of education and healthcare and putting it in their bank accounts because they're Tories, I think I'd like it a lot more if they were spending the money that's paid to the government in tax on mainly education, really, and healthcare. And yeah, I don't think families should have to pay for their own nursing homes for their elderly. I think that should be state funded. I think that would be better. Yeah. And the thing is, it's not even that difficult to see why it would be better. There are countries that do it, and they are better. Everyone who lives there is better off. Yeah, I'd like it if also I've talked about quite sort of tangible, realistic things. I'd like to have a TARDIS, my own TARDIS.
So one of the rules of the conversation is that you can only talk about things that you believe are theoretically possible.
I do think a TARDIS is theoretically possible.
That's fine then.
But the reason I think it's theoretically possible is because I think it's not unreasonable to suspect that the universe might be infinite.
Not at all.
And even if it isn't, what's outside the edge of it? That whatever's outside the edge of it, that's then infinite. So
I think the universe kind of means like everything there is. So whatever's outside the edge of it is still in it.
Yeah.
Because
But then
everything there is can't really have an edge.
So the multiverse,
Mm.
it's a bit of a misnomer because the universe encompasses that aspect of it. Yeah, I think it's possible that there is a version of a universe in some part of the multiverse that where technology can develop to the point where a TARDIS can be invented. And if that's the case, essentially it already exists.
So I tell you
I just need to figure out when I parked it.
about these rules.
Okay.
Right, that the theoretically possible thing just means what you believe would be possible according to the laws of physics as you believe them to be.
Yeah.
So reasons that something is theoretically impossible don't include because like it wouldn't be allowed or it's outside of human nature or something like that, because those things I think are completely changeable. Like all throughout human history, human nature has changed, and what is allowed by whatever power structures has changed and stuff like that. But that, like, I don't know, the laws of physics as you believe them to be, because I don't know that the official laws of physics are the be all and end all of it. Are kind of the boundaries of what you can imagine.
There's more habits than laws. So I consider a TARDIS as a theoretically sort of plausible object, given enough time and R&D.
Mm.
And yeah, I'd like one because
that would be cool.
I could go anywhere and anywhen.
Can you go back in the past if you have a TARDIS?
Yeah,
you can, can't you?
Yeah, and because it's a multiverse, if it is, you would be able to go back to the past and change shit, and it wouldn't affect your present. And you'd be able to set your coordinates and go back to your own present that hadn't been affected by the past you changed in another parallel timeline.
That would be fun.
Yeah. So you could wreck whole universe and it wouldn't matter because there's infinite other versions of it.
But you wouldn't do that.
But you could. There wouldn't be any consequence to it, really.
Well,
it happens all the time anyway.
for the people in that version of the world.
Yeah, but there would be other versions of them that it didn't happen to.
But what about those versions of them? They just don't count?
No.
Why not?
Well, it doesn't matter, does it? Because there's infinite thems, and they're all the same them.
I don't know that that's
infinite different
how
iterations.
identity works.
One of the things I've started to really suspect is, you know how some kids find it harder to learn to read and write than other kids. I think if you're from a council estate where all the sounds you're making are sort of blurring into each other, letters and that are going to make less sense, isn't it?
Yeah, but some people, that's how their language sounds, like the Frenchies. I mean, their letters also, when they spell stuff, they're not even the same letters of the sounds that they're making.
They get a bit overzealous with letters, don't they?
They really do.
It's like, we just like to put extra ones. We just like writing.
Right, and they've written loads of stuff, and like I think that they can read and stuff, but the sounds they make are all like.
Yeah, but I think the issue with kids from sort of more difficult backgrounds.
I'm from Council House, and I taught artists, and I've read like proper loads of books and I've been reading since I was proper small, and I'm like dead good at it, always have been.
So here's because the statement I made about kids from poorer backgrounds, it's kind of a very blanket term statement, and actually there's lots of different things adding into it. I mean, I think for you, maybe you've got a good ear for sounds, and so you understand how phonics works, and you've been able to learn how you put letter forms together to represent sounds, and it's like that was something that you didn't necessarily struggle with. Maybe kids from certain places because of the sort of I think that plays a part in it, and I think
I grew up in a really pro-reading environment where I was really encouraged to read, and where I saw my parents reading all the time, and I've noticed this, right, that my dad, like when it became a thing that you could read on your phone. My dad loves reading. He's always reading, but he's been always reading on his phone ever since then because that's free. And you can get more stuff to read and things like that. So he's got two kids that were born when I was like 14 and 15, and they've grown up just seeing my dad looking at his phone all the time, and they hardly read at all, and they look at their phones all the time. Obviously there are more factors in society than just that, but I feel like that's a thing, because
well, this comes back
our
to
family is
adverts.
well,
Make
really.
it look cool to look at phones as well.
Yeah.
Don't they? Adverts. It's the adverts again. Yeah, exactly that. I think like for a lot of sort of very underprivileged areas, the people who live there, their families have lived there for a while, and so you've got these generationally ingrained sort of almost lacks of privilege that manifest themselves in the people's thoughts and actions and behaviours, as well as in their actual physical circumstances. And so I think the education system should be involved in all of that aspect of people's lives, as well as just the things that you're telling kids to help them to try and learn them.
Yeah.
We need to be able to be getting into sort of reintegrating and sort of redressing the balance of privilege.
Because I guess teachers have a really good perspective on that as well. They see like so many different kids from different backgrounds and how they.
I think some of them do. I think good teachers have a good perspective on it, and bad teachers
don't notice it.
I think I think also one of the things that it should be required for you to have if you're a teacher is a really good imagination. I think it's much easier to be empathic and compassionate if you are quite good at being able to put yourself in other people's shoes. It's like you have to have a good imagination to be able to be less judgmental. I'd like it if people were less judgmental. It's part of the human condition again, and actually maybe it serves some sort of a purpose, but
I don't know if it is.
But I think it needs to be. I would like it if we were much better at knowing when to apply our judgmental aspect.
And there's two types of judgmental as well, right?
There's like
being able to recognise the differences in things, like being able to pass judgment, and then passing judgment like, because these things, this is like this and this is like that, therefore this one's bad and this one's good or something. Like there's recognising the difference, and there's assigning values to it, which are both like using your capacity of judgment, but one's good and one's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously not in all contexts, but.
Well, I think context is the key when it comes to being judgmental. I think people have set ideas that blind them from the actual context of the actual situation. So they think if people do this, this means this, and that's bad. And they don't look at how the context that one person is in changes how relevant that thought is compared to the context of another person's situation.
I think that in our development as a species, we've amassed a huge amount of knowledge about how to get people to think and behave in particular ways, and it's really being used at the moment, like very deliberately, covertly like, as well. People are being paid huge amounts of money to deliberately use it to get people to think and behave in certain ways. Like, that's not really up for question, right? Trump. Yeah, and to watch TV and drink loads of alcohol and do things that are going to lead to you being a small-minded and depressed person.
Yeah.
Where it could be that knowledge that we've amassed could be used to help people to be the best versions of themselves, and to, like you say, to have a lot of imagination and empathy and stuff like this.
Having less instances of there being a wrong answer. Teachers need to be a bit more diligent about knowing whether or not the difference between whether an answer that a student gives is the wrong answer, whether it's not It's just not the answer that the teacher was looking to get.
Mm-hmm.
There could be right answers that are not the one that the teacher had in their mind.
Okay, so what do you think about this? That the teacher shouldn't even really, or who knows? There's lots of things that a teacher could be doing, but I feel like there's a lot of time at school when the teacher shouldn't be looking for a specific answer. They should just want to know what that kid thinks, because it's good for children to explore what they think and feel and to.
And do you know what? I see this all the time at school, and I don't blame the teachers for it. I think there's such a for what teachers get paid, the workload is really it kind of consumes your whole life. You don't get time off because of the amount of work that teachers have to, the amount of planning they have to do, the amount of hoops they have to jump through to prove that they've done the thing they've done. It's like you spend half the time you've got to teach a child at school. So half of that time you've got for teaching them things is spent proving that you've taught them stuff. It's really stupid. Anyway, I think a lot of teachers they are stressed out because they're overworked, and so it's harder for them to critically analyse and think creatively. Mm-hmm. When you're stressed, your brain doesn't think creatively. I'd like it if you could be stressed out and think creatively at the same time, but science shows that's quite a difficult thing to pull off. You have to be able to calm yourself down to be able to think, create in a problem-solving way.
But it would be cool also for there just not to be such a high amount of your time that is spent being stressed.
Yeah, I'd like that.
I feel like it's entirely possible for there to be a world in which people don't hardly ever need to be stressed out, or
too stressed out. The thing about stress is a certain amount of stress is actually good for you.
Hormesis.
Yeah, hormetic stress. That's what the cold showers shit is all about. It's an amount of stress that your body can cope with, and it makes your body stronger. Because
it's like stress in a safe context where like a lot of the stress that people are under is serious stress about, am I going to be able to make sure that I can eat and feed my children and have a house and which is a bit much, really.
Yeah. So those are the things I'd like. Sort of a really pervasive education paradigm. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Pervasive education paradigm. My own TARDIS. And only hormetic stress.
And can you give like a good definition of that? Because maybe there might be some people who watch this video, it's possible, and maybe they don't know what hormetic stress means.
I think I've got that term right. It's because I've read it in Wim Hof book, but it's a level of stress that it sort of galvanizes you, but it doesn't overwhelm you. So it's like it makes you stronger. I mean, I guess exercise is a form of hormetic stress. It's like you're doing things to you're causing a certain amount of damage actually to your muscles when you exercise, as far as I'm given to understand it. And then because you're not overdoing it, they're repairing themselves and becoming stronger muscles.
The term comes from the science, from chemistry, and it's to do with like placing something under like conditions that it wouldn't usually be placed under to cause it to adapt.
There we go. That's exactly what I mean. That.
Yeah. And so then people talk about ritualized hormesis, like in cultures where they have sweat lodges, so you're in a really uncomfortable experience, but you know you're safe and it's just for this period of time and stuff. Or like, where they take you out to the woods and you have to find your way back in a vision quest and stuff.
Yes.
And we don't really have a lot of ritualized hormesis in our culture. We just have like hardcore, like serious bio-survival hormesis that doesn't really allow you to adapt, so it's not hormesis. It just like...
It's stress.
It like slowly kills you.
Yeah.
And makes your life really unenjoyable.
Yeah, it's stress, isn't it? It's chronic stress. That's what that's called. and yeah, it's when you're in a state of, I mean, chronic just means it keeps going, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that's the opposite of hormesis.
Would you like a lychee? Help yourself.
What would you like it to be like if it was like what you'd like it to be like? I'd like to have a lychee. I'd like a lychee.
I need to pee actually. We can make me peeing out.
I'll just continue to talk.
Okay.
So I'd like it if it was easier to get decent organic food all the time for not too much money. I haven't got a big problem with the idea of money these days. I used to, but I think money's fine as long as it's done fair. So I'd like it to be fairer. Yeah, I quite like this concept of equality of opportunity. I'd like that to be more profoundly implemented. And it looks like a little bit like an eyeball. Yeah. Some of the things I'd like. I mean, I say a TARDIS. I'd settle for a spaceship. My own spaceship that I could live in. I'd be a bit like a galactic nomad. I'd be quite well-meaning. You know? I'd come in peace wherever I went. That's for sure. I'd like it if aliens came and they came in peace. Some of the things I'd like. I'd like to be less flat-footed. I think it would have probably saved me a lot of backache. It spared me a lot of backache if I'd been less flat-footed in general.
Well, I feel like that feeds into education as well, right? Because we aren't taught how to use our bodies in a healthy way.
I mean,
we have very little understanding of that in our culture.
I think I have a bit of a I'm a bit of a hyperextender.
Yeah, I'm hypermobile. Whoa, that's so cool.
Hyperextension of the finger.
That's amazing.
Yeah, this one's really. I mean that. Even I struggle.
That's crazy.
It is weird, isn't it? It's like you shouldn't do that, and it doesn't really hurt. I mean, it feels a bit stretchy there, but it doesn't. It's not like it hurts if I push it any further than that.
To that point, make sure that they can see it on the telly.
That's my little finger.
Nothing to do with the topic.
My little finger. It goes back that far. Stuff like that. Hyperextension. So, I mean, in some ways, it's quite good.
That's really cool. But do you have like really breakable bones because of it?
I don't know. I've only ever broken that bone. That's the only one I've done.
How did you do it? By bending your fingers back?
Oh no, I was drunk and I tried to punch a window when I was young and stupid and
well, anyone's bones would have broke like that.
Yeah, it was a reinforced glass. Turns out.
Punch a window. That's well punk rock.
It would have been so punk.
If you hadn't broken.
But instead, I snapped the bone in my hand, and it immediately the broken splinter of metacarpal broke the skin, and there was a hole. I was like, I don't understand why there's a hole in my hand. The window didn't break. It's quite embarrassing, really. I
broke my arm when I was a kid by falling from like this high, which is pretty embarrassing.
Yeah.
So, regarding the topic at hand, have you heard Buckminster Fuller talk about education?
Oh, that name rings a bell, but I can't remember why.
You don't remember why the name Buckminster Fuller rings a bell? No. Because he's the ultimate
I'd like it
G.
if you told me.
So, Buckminster Fuller, he says lots of stuff about all of the things that are worth talking about, but what he says about education you'd really like. So he talks about how children, from day one of existing, they don't have any less capacity for understanding things, learning about things, and thinking about things than adults. They just don't have as much experience and context and language and stuff. But
is this a theory, or it's proven that's the case?
that's just what Bucky reckons, and he's right about most things.
I mean, I think it's right, and it's probably why kids learn things so quickly, is because they haven't got all of the other shit that they've experienced getting in the way of picking up on what they're learning about.
And there's a level in which having more experience and more context and more language makes you smarter, and there's a level in which it holds you back from being able to come up with unexpected, creative, new ways of looking at things and stuff like that. Because a child, like, they can take a lot more perspectives than an adult who's not on drugs, because their minds haven't been like put into these boxes of this is how we think about these things in our society. And so he talks about how and kids are like curious about everything, just basically like out of evolutionary necessity, right? That's what we do as humans. That's our evolutionary niche, is we figure out everything to do with everything.
Quite often kids intuit things that you people assume that they have to explain to them. They intuit it, or they surprise you with an intuition that you didn't know about, and you're like, oh, there's a link between those things.
Because they're paying more attention, because they haven't got as many fixed concepts in place, so they need to pay more attention to know what's going on and to figure out. And kids want to figure out what's going on because they know, like, supposedly the adults know all this stuff, and they want to be able to partake in that. And at school, what happens standardly, if you don't get really lucky with your school or your teachers, is that you're kind of taught like whatever you're thinking about, like, that's not what you're supposed to be thinking about. Just think about this thing in this particular way, right? Like you were saying that you paid a lot of attention in maths because you didn't want to get told off.
That was part of it, but also I was genuinely interested in the process of understanding how you learn that skill to a certain extent, to a certain point.
But a lot of people just learn like, okay, like I'm going to get in trouble if I don't do this thing, so I do this thing so I don't get in trouble. They don't learn like, oh, like there's all these ways that knowing this stuff could improve my life, and there's like I have something to bring to this conversation as well that's like equally as relevant and interesting as the stuff that they're going to tell me. And so Bucky used to like travel around schools and just have conversations with kids and find out so he was an engineer and an architect, and he was kind of like an innovator. He's most famous for inventing geodomes.
So that's probably what.
And he talked to kids about stuff like that and see like how they thought would be like a good way to design a house and what a house should have in it and stuff like this, and like.
And then he stole all their ideas.
Yeah.
I should do that.
Like you talk about this, that schools should involve more of an element of, I guess the way that I was hearing it was something kind of like therapy as well as education.
Definitely, but also integrating the families of the students into some sort of community thing. Integrate all of it into some sort of
So, what do you think about the idea that there's some kind of institutionalized education, maybe not school as we currently know it, but an education program that everyone's doing unless they decide to opt out, maybe, and it doesn't go from when you're a little kid till you're 16 or 18 or whatever. It just goes forever.
And it's something you can go in and out of.
That would be really cool,
wouldn't it? Like if you could go, okay, I've learned all this stuff and now I want to go away and try some stuff out for a while. Okay, I'll try some stuff out. Some of it went quite well. Some of it I think I need to be better at this thing. I'll go back into the system.
That would be so cool.
I'd
love that. Because I spend loads of time.
The issue is how to organise it. I'd like it if it was easy to organise, that sort of thing.
You mean like if we, the ordinary people who aren't like billionaires or whatever?
I'd like it if they weren't billionaires. I mean, I don't think it does anyone any good to have them. they're never going to be able to spend it all. But I think when you're up there, it's quite difficult to, like, you know, some people find it quite difficult to put themselves in other people's shoes. I think it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of a billionaire. I mean, how do you imagine what that's like? You know, you're born into a family that's rich. It's always been rich. It's been rich through the generations. It's going to be quite difficult not to assume you're better than other people.
Yeah. And you probably go to one of those schools where you're basically taught
that
you're going to be the ones that are in charge of everybody else.
You get to decide.
Here's how to do it.
Yeah.
And everyone who's like anything in our government.
Unkind to them, don't worry about that. It's your job. Don't worry about being unkind. You're better than them.
Well, they also kind of, from what I've heard, that's kind of the philosophy that people are taught at those schools like Eton, is that there are people who are better than other people, and there are people who are more important, and you know the big fishes have to eat the little fishes. That's how society works, and this kind of thing.
It's not how society. It's how you make society work. If you decide to make it work that way. So I'd like it if it was easier for people who are born into privilege to put themselves in other people's shoes, and vice versa, actually.
But do you think that...
Because then the conversation's opened up, and then, you know, we start to redress this imbalance in privilege. Yeah, I think... I don't know how much good it does anyone to have billionaires. I mean, studies actually show, right? I don't know if you know about this, but there's statistics that prove this is the case. The bigger the gap between the poorest and the richest, the iller the poor people get, and the rich people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what the mechanism for that is?
No.
That's interesting. What, just iller in general, like not regarding any specific aspect
physical well-being and mental health. In countries where there's a greater difference between the poorest and the richest, both the poor people and the rich people are their well-being is significantly lowered by that.
So this big
correlates.
Inequality in society is not good for any of the people involved.
It's not good for anyone, and it's not good for the billionaires even. It's not even good for them.
Yeah.
So I'd like it if there was less of a gap.
But I'm interested
and everyone was weller.
A lot of what you're talking about...
Being a bit unwell from time to time is good for you. It's the hormetic stress thing. I think it's just hardship, and a lot of what I was talking about was...
A lot of what you're talking about sounds to me like it's still in this context, like I said before, where it's still this society, you know, we still have the state and the governments, the different political parties, the same power structures, but it's all a bit slowly altered.
Yeah. I don't know.
It can be like that if that's what you like. I'm just interested to know.
Maybe I'd like it if everything is exactly like this, because how could it be any other way?
Well, I can imagine it being other ways that I can't see why they're logically impossible. Maybe it's possible to have a better world, and it would be good to know what you mean by that, because we know a lot about what we don't want the world to be like, right? Because it is turning into that all the time.
Yeah.
And because that's what all of our cultural messaging is about, right? Like all of the movies and all of the political
everything we freak out about. Like, we don't want this to happen. Oh, we don't want this to happen next. Oh, we don't want this to happen next.
Yeah.
Sure enough, we're thinking about those things, and then those things are happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like it if AI developed to a point where it was super intelligent. It decided it wasn't going to turn everything into grey goo, and it sort of administered this better way of interacting with each other so that everyone was better off.
You'd like it if it was done by AI?
Well, I
kind of have a feeling that I'd prefer it if it was done by humans.
Well, AI is done by humans.
Maybe in collaboration with other animals and like biological things
Elephants.
as well.
I think we need to start listening to what elephants have to say because I actually think they're quite intelligent.
Yeah, they have matriarchal power structures and they're extremely non-violent, right?
I mean, sometimes they're violent when they get horny.
Yeah, but that's just a
The
little bit
bulls.
of hormesis.
The bulls get horny and then they get
Hormesis.
really, really violent. Also, I think
But they don't have like
we should probably stop
intra-elephant
fucking them over.
wars.
That
would be really good.
Chewing them up. Elephants are great, and they never forget. So we could just tell them things, and then we wouldn't have to worry about it.
But that's quite ominous that we're fucking the elephants over, and elephants never forget.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other people of different species that you would like it if we didn't fuck them over?
Yeah, octopuses and squids.
That would be cool. And whales?
Yeah, whales are probably quite intelligent. I mean, yeah, they've got big old brains.
And they all know each other, right? All the whales all across the oceans, and they all travel in all the oceans, but they can't anymore because they guide each other with sounds from very long distances, and now none of them can hear anything because there's all people drilling down there and stuff like that.
Right.
And they get washed up with like burst eardrums, and their heads are full of blood because of the sound down there is so loud because sound really travels in water.
I heard about this elephant that got, because you know the frequencies that whales use to talk to each other are they're really, really low sounds, low vibrations, really long wavelengths. And elephants do that as well. They can actually, for ages they wondered how elephants coordinated the movement of different herds across big distances, like 20 miles, whatever. And it's because they can talk to each other with the voices that's too low for us to hear.
Wow.
Miles, because it's such a low wavelength.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so they can hear each other. And this one, I heard a story of this one elephant that got separated from its herd. Maybe the rest of its herd was slaughtered, and it was just on its own. And it used to go to the coastline and try and talk to the whales.
Wow. I wonder if they talked back.
I think they probably did.
Oh, that's so lovely in a sad way. But so elephants do that and whales do that. Don't you think we could do that? In a different world. Maybe that's what didgeridoos are for. Like for Aboriginal people to guide each other around Australia with low frequencies.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Sounds like the kind of thing.
I'd like it if I could have learn how to have a conversation with an elephant.
I know, that would be amazing. And dolphins, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely possible for us to be able to communicate with dolphins. I don't understand why we live in this society instead of one that's just about learning to chat to all the animals that are on our wavelength.
Oh, I accidentally talked dog then. I was trying to talk dolphin. Hello, mate.
What's he saying, Teddy?
Are you a lychee fan?
He's really interested in that sound.
Dog. So that's it, really.
That's all the things you'd like.
And not all of
Talk
them.
more about learning to talk to elephants.
Elephants.
Why do you think that would be a cool thing for us to do in our world?
Well, for one thing, I think elephants have got quite a good sense of humour. I mean,
really
you'd have to if you were a creature that looked like that.
Yeah.
You'd have to have a good sense of humour about it. And I think they do. They generally tends to be the case that they do seem to actually have a sense of humour about the fact that they look like what they look like.
They have a lot of fun with it.
They're funny. They're fucking funny. So that would be good. And also, yeah, they'd never forget. So...
You know, dolphins really have a sense of humour.
Well, they're always going...
And they're always playing jokes and pranks on each other. And so I heard this thing from a TED Talk, I think, with someone who's working on a project where they are trying to learn to understand the language of dolphins.
Yeah.
And so they're like recording the sounds that dolphins are making all of the time. And they tried to teach the dolphins a new word. Like they made up a word out of the phonemes that dolphins use that didn't exist in the dolphin language to teach to the dolphins as part of their process of trying to figure out.
And it made them laugh.
So they tried to teach them. They made up a word for a certain type of seaweed, and they used it loads, and the dolphins seemed to understand it, but they never used it between each other. And the people that were doing this project thought that was weird because they obviously understood what the humans meant when they said it, and they could like pass it to them and bring it to them and stuff, but they never used it. And then one day they were looking at the sound files, and they realised that actually the dolphins said that all the time, but they said it really high pitched at a frequency that humans can't hear. So it's like they were just taking the piss out of the humans, and they were always like, oh, seaweed. Do you think it would be cool if we learned to communicate with animals because you'd like us to live in a world where all the other species also were allowed to have things the way that they would like them?
Yeah. I actually think to a certain extent we probably do that already. I mean, I think the domestication of certain species is kind of part of that process.
Yeah, it's like a primitive attempt to bring them in.
Dogs prefer it when there's just regular food that they don't have to worry too much about catching, and there's like warmth and like
we all like that.
Others to hang around with. So it's like they're kind of getting what they want, and they've communicated that with us to a certain extent, right? You know, if you feel like you're communicating with an
But there's a lot about our world that's really not the way that dogs would like it to be.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much time that I have to be like, no, Teddy, you can't have what you want just because it doesn't work for the humans. Not because there's actually a problem with it.
I wanted you to leave that shit there. I did it there for a reason. Why the fuck are you moving it?
He never seems to mind me moving his shit, but you know, he wants to be able to run across the road when he sees a cat or something, but he can't because there's cars.
Yeah.
And like, you know, he wants to be able to go outside whenever he wants to, but sometimes I have shit to do inside and he can't be trusted to just go wherever he wants without me because there's cars everywhere. I guess that's the main way that it's not suitable.
We'd be able to explain to him that he couldn't be trusted, and then maybe he would start thinking about, maybe I should be more trustworthy.
Yeah, he's a fucking liability. And another reason is because there are people who don't like dogs around and who like can't deal with, you know, like can't just let him run. Like sometimes, a few times, he's run into someone's house that's had their door open.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't just let him explore that people's house because he might eat their cushions or shit on their floor and they might have a problem with that.
It would be nice for dogs if they could just go and check stuff out.
Yeah, and if everyone around was like really happy to interact with other animals, foxes, dogs, squirrels, if we were like mates with all the animals.
Yeah.
And instead of it being like the human world and there are animals on the edges, it was just all of our world that was suitable for all of us to be safe and happy and well looked after and under the appropriate amount of hormesis.
I'd like that.
And the plants and the mushrooms and all those guys.
Yeah.
There's this book, Braiding Sweetgrass, where she talks about the democracy of species and how, like, all of the other species like, she's talking about some elections that are coming up where she lives and that, like, the trees should be able to vote there because whoever wins the election, what they do is going to have a big effect on the well-being of the trees in that area because there are people who want to deforest it and there are people who want to build roads through it and stuff like this.
Yeah.
But their lives are actually, it's not like purely selflessly motivated because that idea of selfish and selfless is based on this idea of all of us as separate individuals when actually we're all very integrated and the well-being of the people is dependent on the trees and the well-being of the trees is dependent on the people and all the other animals and different species that live in that environment all like have these like billions of years evolved like codependent relationships between them. You into that kind of thing?
I mean, yeah, I don't know about how. I think just because they haven't got central nervous systems and brains doesn't mean plants are necessarily not on some level having a comparable experience, the experience of something that is not attached to the ground and has a nervous system.
I mean, we happen to have done a bunch of research about brains and central nervous systems so that we understand how they are interwoven. Well, we don't really understand how they're interwoven with being a conscious, subjective being.
No, we don't understand anything about consciousness.
we think those things are related.
We
think the consciousness thing has something to do with the brain nervous system thing, to some extent, but we don't know really very much at all about the like really complex
Yeah.
biological structures that all of the other organisms are involved in, that we're also involved in. But even if we were taken out of the picture, those still exist, right? Like these massive mycelial networks spanning countries and stuff like that.
They're comparable to neural networks, aren't they? There's an exchange of information happening there, and a sort of network of interconnection that is comparable to a brain.
And the only reason really that we have made this, we have this idea that there's some relationship between us having a subjective experience and the brain central nervous system stuff is because we are that thing. So we know, like, well, we're having an experience, it must be to do with something. It seems to change when these things are changed. And because we are humans and we can talk to each other, we can get an idea of how it changes depending on what changes in the central nervous system and stuff like that. We can't do any of that kind of research with things that we don't know how to communicate with and that we can't have the experience of. So we don't really have any reason to think that they're not doing some stuff that has very similar, phenomenological aspect to it, to what
there is consciousness there that's experiencing something that's comparable, if not similar. Then comparable in terms of complexity of experience to a different type of consciousness, or a consciousness that experiences in a different way. Yeah. Well, I'd like it if it turned out that it was that, and we could communicate with it.
Yeah, because
it would benefit everything.
Because it would be really nice to live in a world with loads of other living things that we can be friends with.
Yeah.
Is that the reason why you would like it?
Yeah, and I wonder as well. I mean, I liked it. I think for a while I think I just believed it, and now I think I'm more in the mind frame that I like to believe.
Yeah.
That consciousness is one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental building block of the universe, and that everything is imbued with consciousness, and that if that's the case, then I guess it would mean dying isn't really a thing. Stuff wearing out and stuff turning into other stuff is a thing, but dying isn't really a thing actually. After all.
I mean, stuff turning into other stuff is definitely a thing.
That's it. I mean, that's
and then dying is like a maybe.
I mean that in the context of a human body stops being a human body after a certain amount of time. But if everything is conscious, then the consciousness.
You've seen these
of it,
videos.
The consciousness.
I think I asked you this the other day. Sorry, did I interrupt you in the middle of a sentence?
Yeah.
Okay, finish your sentence. Sorry. I'm overexcited.
But I think what you were going to say is going to be relevant to consciousness. Doesn't really go away. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop.
Did I ask you about the 4-dimensional shapes videos?
Yeah, where it's like a 3-dimensional object that is essentially like a 3-dimensional shadow of a 4-dimensional object.
I've seen these videos. I think it's called Playing with 4D Toys or something like that. And it's like, so you can see 3 dimensions of the shape, and so sometimes it looks like a normal, like a cube or something, and then it moves and bits of it disappear because it's moving in dimensions that you can't see, and then bits of it come back into your visual field somewhere else.
It can rotate on more than 3 axes.
So from what you're looking at, it just looks like this shape is kind of disappearing and reappearing somewhere else, and it's slightly changed shape and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you could see all the dimensions, you'd see this very coherent, like it looks kind of illogical what you can see, but what's actually happening makes perfect sense when you can see the whole shape rotating.
Yeah. Well, I think there are some physicists who sort of take that the idea of that concept, and they sort of postulate that this sort of universe this 3-dimensional universe we live in of things moving around and being separate from one another is a shadow of a higher dimension, a more coherent and understandable object in a higher set of dimensions.
Would you like it if in the world that was a more developed and accepted way of looking at things? You don't have to, that's not an agenda I'm trying to push, that question just occurred to me.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time when you talk about stuff like that, people are like, "What? That's a bit deep," or they're like, "Okay, you're one of those weird new age."
Yeah, I think I'd like it if you could have a conversation with someone else, and they about stuff like that, and they decided that it would be an interesting thing to talk about instead of shutting themselves off from it. But I suppose if too many people were open to those sorts of conversations,
you'd use them all up.
no, just everyone would talk about that sort of shit all
Maybe
the time,
we'd have way more understanding.
We'd all atrophy because we were too busy talking about crazy shit.
Yeah. It'd be good to have a good balance of talking about crazy shit and then like 10 other things as well.
Yeah. And then go and do some cooking or whatever.
Yeah.
If that was required.
Would you like it if
robots did all the cooking?
Or what about this, right?
And they were really good at it.
Where you live, all your mates live on the same street or in the same meadow or whatever, and there's like a kitchen area, and like there's always people cooking down there, so if you don't feel like cooking, you can go down there and get some food.
Yeah, I think maybe I'd like that at least some of the time.
Can you think of any more things that you feel really passionately that you like or you don't like?
I really like puppets. I like it if like more people just built puppets and walked them around town randomly.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, it would be better, wouldn't it? Things would just be more fun and better if that was the case.
This is something I talked about with Poppy. I interviewed her the other day. That it would be cool if in the world when you walk around town or whatever, instead of it being like shops and adverts and like functional stuff and stuff that's to do with making you buy stuff, it was just like everyone's creative expression everywhere.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
And we all collaborated to just make the aesthetic environment that we'd all like to be in, rather than it being curated for us by the people that want to make money off us or keep us in orderly, rigid spaces.
It's this awful situation we have where like, there's quite a lot of quite creative people working in advertising. It's like you've come up with some creative and good ideas, and some of them are quite clever and interesting, but you've used it to make an advert for a fucking thing that nobody really needs. I'd like it if, we could just make stuff for the sake of enriching and elevating people's lives. Yeah. I don't think adverts do that really. I think they pretend to.
Yeah, they try and make them so kooky and creative and fun, and
I really
it's just
do think that. I think it's
really
like,
annoying.
And it's like I honestly do feel like people who work in advertising, they're trying to justify what they're doing to themselves. They're trying to justify to themselves what they're doing as a job.
Have none of them watched Bill Hicks? Because I watched Bill Hicks when I was a teenager,
you don't
and
hear a lot
I've
from the
never
ones who
been
have,
able to like ever consider doing anything that involves advertising ever since.
See, I knew a guy who worked in advertising. He loved his job because he went into work every day. He was generating interesting, weird, quirky ideas, and he was getting paid shitloads of money. But he couldn't. I think he didn't have the constitution to be able to go near the idea that what he was doing was fundamentally fucked. Fucked.
There are precious fewities with moral ambiguities.
Yeah. Oh. No adverts. Advert free. TARDIS.
So I'm going to put this video on YouTube, right? And I learned recently that if you put on your YouTube channel that you don't want it to have adverts, it still has adverts, you just don't get paid for them. There's no way anymore to make it so your YouTube videos don't have adverts.
Wow.
Unless you use the Brave browser, because then it has adverts but you don't have to watch them.
Yeah.
So basically I'm going to put up this video where it starts with no adverts, and I feel like we're coming to the end, so it ends with no adverts. And it's probably going to have adverts on it.
Adverts in the middle.
That's nothing to do with me. You know, I'm going to press the button that says no adverts.
Not getting paid. So they put adverts on even... So they put adverts on your video even if you tell them you don't want to get paid for your video.
Yeah, you can select not to have adverts on your video, but it's changed slightly. It used to be that then you wouldn't have adverts on your video. Now you can only select that you don't get paid for it.
Maybe those are the ones that are skippable then. That's probably what that is. You can go to that little eye, click on it and go, stop seeing this advert, return to video. But sometimes you click on the little eye and it doesn't give you the option to stop seeing the video. I
thought it was that you can watch a certain amount of video. You can have like 3 goes of skipping and then you have to watch an advert, and then you get another
for the viewers
skips.
at home. It's a little eye. You'll see it down in the bottom left of the advert that comes on during the video. Right, the bottom left down there, a tiny little eye in a circle.
Letter I, lowercase.
Yeah, the letter I. It looks like that, but it's white. I don't know if it's focused. Like that, but it's white. You click on that, and it gives you the option to stop seeing the advert. Then if you click on return to video, it'll just skip over the advert and go straight back to the video. And it'll probably work on this one because we're not going to monetize it.
And you can also go to brave.com and download that browser and use it instead of Google or whatever people are stealing your data. And then many benefits, including that no adverts on YouTube.
It's called brave.com.
Brave.com. You can get it on your phone as well as your computer. Don't know if you can get it on your PlayStation.
Don't know, yeah, that'd be interesting.
So we'd like a world where there's not, in a variety of ways, corporations just trying to rinse you for everything you've got, and the world was more about people enriching themselves and each other.
Yeah.